next speaker is Laura Aldrete. Is that right? Laura has participated in urban development projects and planning efforts in the private and public sectors throughout her career. As a transit-oriented development specialist, she has become the focus of community revitalization over the past 15 years. Laura has worked on dozens of station areas in various stages of development, from station location to securing a developer for public-private partnerships to bring the development out of the ground. Prior to Parsons Brinkerhoff, Laura served as the Assistant Director of the Denver Urban Renewal Authority, Special Projects Director in Denver's Office of Economic Development, and the Stapleton Project Manager in the Mayor's Office. Colorado native, Laura received a master's degree in Urban and Regional Planning and Latin American Studies from UCLA. I'd like to now welcome Laura Aldrete.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for sticking in with us for the last session here. I have just one technical question. How much time do I have? 20 minutes. Okay, great. And then just for the audience, how many of you all are from a governmental agency? Should show of hands. And then everybody else is public or private sector consulting? Consulting, maybe. Okay, I'm just trying to figure out. And then who's working at in a super urban area? Anybody working urban, big cities? And then we've got kind of suburb communities working with. I'm just trying to. Okay. Good shout out for the suburbs. Okay. Well, so I'm going to tag off Roger's theme or his case study on Portland, which some people say is probably the birthplace of POD. But I tend to think a little bit in terms of the economic development. As Ron mentioned, I've had some experience working at urban renewal authorities, and so everything's got to make money at some point, even the really bad projects, which is what urban renewal authorities do. But I think this is a good quote from James Howard Kunstler to think about what we're doing here in the next century, and our work that before us here is that it's not just about building it, but it's also about making the place that we arrive to worth staying in. So why place matters? And I come from Placemaking, which is an organization within Parsons Brinkerhoff, and we really think about that intersection between infrastructure, transportation, and community. And so I think there's two things. As an urban planner, I realized that nobody would really listen to me if I talked about the greatest idea I would have about public space or how the sidewalk should feel or the size of the trees or the shape of the canopy. But when I started putting dollars to it, suddenly people cared. And so I always try to associate that then. The feeling that we get of those really great places that we like to go visit when we're on vacation, or the places in our hometown that we tend to go have a cup of coffee on Saturday or Sunday morning with our families. And I want to talk a little bit about value capture, which is proving up that place matters from an economic standpoint. This is work that was done by Strategic Economics and Reconnecting America. I'll say that these are done. This study was done prior to the recession, and I think it still holds even more so now because there's what we're seeing in Colorado and in some other areas is a pent-up demand. And what you see on the graphic on the left is value premium of land. And as you introduce transit, that value of land suddenly goes up. Once the transit line opens, it tapers a little bit. Again, I would say that maybe there's an opportunity post-recession that because we've got this built-up demand, that you might see land value extend a little bit further higher instead of tapering off. On the right-hand side is really expected profit per square foot of land. And on the top graph, you see that this is showing prior to transit opening. You've got townhomes showing the greatest profit. And then as you become more complex and higher density in your residential, the margin of profit begins to shrink. What you see in the bottom graph on the right-hand side is that you've got higher and higher incidences of profit margin with the introduction of transit. So you're beginning to see a price point differential and a premium that people are willing to pay for high, dense, walkable, mixed-use communities. I'm going to just walk through some simple principles of TOD, transit-oriented development, and this is the best way I can think about to graphically to represent this, where you've got on the left-hand side, you've got what I would consider auto-oriented, and then in the middle, down here, you've got the transit line and then the station. And so typically what we see is a big parking lot. You see isolated buildings, perhaps commercial, maybe residential, but those are also surrounded by parking. And then you've got kind of an odd, quirky network that's partially connected on connecting the buildings. And then on what is transit-oriented development, you've got a much more of a grid system, similar to what Roger talked about in the Portland district, Pearl district. Is that working? And then you've also got, it's a much more organized set of building structures around open space, as well as parking lots that are pushed out and around, so that you're still within that quarter mile, half mile, but you first have the opportunity to experience this place that hopefully feels pleasant. So just some overall principles about placemaking. I tend to say, everyone asks if there are specific numbers about what's your density that you have to have at a station, depending on the size. I think it's really hard to say that. I think there's numbers certainly out there, say 9 to 25 for transit or frequent bus. But I think you have to talk about it in terms of the context of what you're working in. If you're working in suburbs or you're working in an urban context, it's going to be a very different answer. So you're just pushing that. You're just trying to push that number higher, wherever you are. It's all about the quality of the pedestrian environment, so that you want to walk or bike or be in the place that's the public right-of-way, which is your public realm that belongs to the people. You want to, on a corridor system, as a node of these series of stations, you want to think of them as a village of stations that kind of come together. So each one wants to be unique. Otherwise, you get that competitive cannibalism that can potentially happen. So where is a good place for employment to focus? Where is a good place for residential to focus? Still, obviously, having some touches of mixed use involved in that as well. Then mix of uses and prices. I think it's very important that we have mixed income housing opportunities, not just affordable or not just high-end. We try to provide for that for people at all stages of life. I mean that generationally as well as economically. And then lastly, it has to come from, you have to get buy-in, and it has to come from within the community itself and building that into the program. So I'm going to go through these quickly because I want to focus a little bit more on a case example of a commuter rail project we have going on in Denver. Compact mixed use, this graphic, this building, sorry, I guess my graphic didn't show. Then here are some examples of the pedestrian-oriented environment. There's the Pearl district here on the lower right-hand side. Here, 16th Street Mall in Denver. This is a Vancouver shot. And then that connectivity with the grid, I think we really need to think about how are people walking. A lot of places have horse carriages. Still, it's very romantic, I guess. And it renders to a historic time for most cities, and so you've got to think about those types of nodes as well. And so giving them lots of options to get in and through the area and to this transit station. Mixed income housing, as I mentioned. Parking it, what we're finding now is we're moving into working in private-public partnerships to bring development out of the ground, is that it all comes down to parking at stations. This is a DART station in Dallas. You can see they call this the Texas Donut. So they've taken their structured parking and they've wrapped it with residential, so that when you're walking in the street, you don't necessarily see it. And this houses both not only the residential requirements, but as well as the commuter parking. And then here are some other examples. This is Belmar, Lakewood, Colorado, where they've put art labs in the ground floor, and then you've got tucked behind it, you've got parking, as well as on the second, third floor. and an example here of also putting retail on the ground floor, wrapping it, and then parking up above. I would say this is probably one of our biggest challenges that we're seeing now. This is another important piece is getting a champion. We listened to the mayor earlier this afternoon, and I can't emphasize enough how important it is to have somebody who will come, stand before a podium of anybody and banter about the importance of rail and transportation and bringing that piece of land use and transportation together to create trans-area development. They've got to have the political will. You've also got to be able to link your transit-oriented development planning work with what kind of finance mechanisms that both the public sector has. Are there some new creative tools that can be developed at the state legislative system, place that can waterfall down to the local jurisdiction? And then what we're seeing is that development is mostly only moving forward under public-private partnerships. That private development is really tough to do in these more complex developments. TOD should happen at all stages of development. And so if you've got a station, even with 2 acres of land that's available for redevelopment, in today's economy, post the recession, developers are having a very difficult time being able to take under the whole 2 acres and pull 160 units out of the ground on 2 acres at a time, in one single bound, and that they've got to phase it over several years. And so it doesn't mean that they can just do whatever they want and push the building to the back and not think about quality pedestrian environments. So that idea that all these principles of transit-oriented development should be integrated in phase 1 and phase 2 and subsequent phases. But the world I live in now in terms of working with developers is that they can't just build enormous amounts of their development or do it all at once. They've got to phase it due to the financing. So just a quick recap. It's finding the champion first. That's probably it's going to be an uphill battle anyways. But if you can get that champion first and foremost, that is going to help carry the water tremendously. Building partnerships. Obviously, we saw that with the M1 and the other cases where it's not just about public and private, but getting the nonprofits, finding partners anywhere you can to leverage a bigger success. Connecting land use and transportation. This is really where whoever is working at the MDOT level needs to ensure that at the local level that there is good, strong land use planning and thinking going on about how they're leveraging that large public investment that's going through their community to make their place better and to deliver a sense of place alongside that public investment that's going in. You might as well take advantage of it. Know the market. In many places, there's this desire to have a fantastic TOD, and it'll be the answer to the community's problems. But if the market hasn't arrived there, you've got to first go work to make the market come there, and you've got to bring other components together to bring that market up so that the developer can actually develop. Think multimodal. I talked about that already. And be layered. And my point here is that it's probably your community's one opportunity for the next 50 to 100 years to do the right thing in terms of transit and TOD and bringing land use and transportation together. And if you can pull in whatever kind of educational, affordable housing, parks and open space, whatever other elements really need to pull in to help that community as a whole, not just that one little place, that's going to give it the authenticity and that uniqueness that's about your community. Okay, so I'm going to do a quick, I think I've got 5 minutes, to do a quick case study of Old Town Arvada, which is a suburb outside of Denver, Colorado, the central business district of Denver. It's part of an Eagle P3 project. Construction is going on right now, and as you see here, these are 2 legs of the fast track system, which is $4.7 billion transportation program that includes light rail and commuter. We found out a couple years after 2004 we voted for it that we were really short on money. So we've gone out and solicited, RTD, which is the Regional Transportation District, went out and solicited for a P3, a DS bomb, and procured an agreement to build these two lines, and a little squiggly up here. And Aldrete is the station here that we're talking about. So you can see some of the costs that are going into this, and you can see why 4.7 billion for six lines certainly didn't cut it. But hey, good news, Old Town Aldrete, one of the great things about Old Town Aldrete is that it's got a historic old town. It's got street grids. They've been working very hard to put their capital investment back into that old town, to improve streetscape, to build a new library, to bring in small local businesses. So they've been working very hard. And then they have this opportunity to put in a station right here. This area up here is the old town, and it goes further north. RTD, the Transit Authority, has a requirement per the EIS to put in 400 parking spaces. Part of this, 5 acres of this was owned by the RTD. There's an acre that's owned by the Urban Renewal Authority and an acre owned by the city. So this isn't really TOD, but everyone just said, oh, well, we'll figure that out later. The city of Aldrete said, that's not quite enough. We want to have parking structure day one. Then RTD started, in those conversations with the city, said, well, what if we try to do both at the same time? Because the one thing RTD knows that they don't do well, they know that no matter where they're going to put the parking structure, no matter how many developers or cities they talk to about where the right place to put the parking structure is, the day they build it, they put it in the wrong place, because the developer comes in and is like, oh, well, if we moved it 50 feet that way, then I could have put a structure in, and could have put residential to wrap it. So they just consistently get it wrong. So they partnered. Everybody's put money into the development deal, and they have, as I've kind of listed out here, it's been a long process to ultimately get to today, which is we selected a master developer for the total 8 acres. So they're going to have to negotiate with the Urban Renewal Authority, the city, and RTD to put all those 8 acres together and for development. This is just a quick schematic, but you've got here the station right over here, and then they've got a hotel, they've got residential over here. There's a parking structure here and a parking structure here. They've taken the 400 parking requirement and they've broken it into 2 parts. They've also added in the residential requirements for the mixed use, and they've put in a grocer along here, which we're not sure market-wise if that's actually going to work, but we're testing that. But just the points through the timeline is RTD made some fanfare about trying to do a partnership and solicited cities to become engaged. And then they began, almost a year to assemble land and to work out an IGA between them about how they would operate. It was executed in 2012. RTD had to work with FTA and the private developer who was doing the line to pull out the land so that they could roll that into the transit-oriented development. So I'm talking too fast. And so where we are now, as I mentioned, we've got an executed exclusive negotiated agreement with the developer, and we expect to do planning and design through 2014 and then start construction in 2015. That will be at least one of the parking garages, probably some surface parking, meet our EIS need, and then the hotel as well as some residential in the first phase. So I think that was it. Here's just another. So I don't want to. I know we've got one more speaker, and I know I went fast. Are there questions that I can answer for anybody? Yeah. So the two parking lots has been just for the commuter parking, and at this point, RTD has the ability to tax or for pay, to have a fee on it, but they do not, as of today, collect any revenue on that parking. Well, the land, we don't know exactly what the ownership of that will be, which will, if it's a city, it won't necessarily be taxed. The parking structure won't be taxed. Correct. Right. So in terms of overall for the development generating revenue, yes, we're going from ground zero to, something more than that, quite a bit more than that, because right now the land is held by some public entity. And so we're certainly using tax increment financing. The city is kicking in about $6 million for parking structure, which won't cover it, but it helps a long way. And the developer obviously is coming to the table with funds. The RTD has pulled about $2.7 million out of the overall project that would have gone for an elevator, the parking, surface parking, and is putting that back into the project, and has, which will be also part of their land contribution. God, I hope so. Otherwise, I should be fired from my consulting job.
This is just one note of this whole system in the Denver area. Are similar processes going on for the other stations along this line? And this is just one example.
So it's a great question, and I went super fast on this case study. There are 3 lines existing in the RTD light rail system. Fast Track is bringing along 6 more. Of those 6 corridors, there are 57 new stations that are coming online. Fortunately, it's dragging out a little bit because there's no way our market could absorb that much TOD. And one of the big things that we've had to talk about regionally is, no one likes to say prioritization, but in fact there are some places where the market is much more ready than others. This was one, and part of that selection that RTD went through in terms of identifying it as a pilot project is that the market was there in part because Arvada worked very hard to using those street space, invest in the library, programming downtown. Begin putting all these pieces in place to help put a market in place for the arrival of the station and then the TOD that would follow it. Does that make sense?